300 years ago, humans discovered they were not alone in the universe. Ships from distant stars appeared in Earth's sky, and the world changed forever. The aliens called themselves the Conquered of 17 species, and they welcomed humanity with smiles and promises of friendship. At first, everything seemed wonderful. Humans traded with alien merchants. Scientists shared knowledge across the stars. Earth celebrated its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. Children grew up dreaming of alien worlds and adventures among the stars. But the celebration did not last. Within 50 years, human companies had grown larger than alien businesses that had existed for thousands of years. Human scientists solved problems that had confused elder races for centuries. When wars broke out on distant worlds, human soldiers were hired to fight, and they won battles that everyone said were impossible to win. The aliens watched all of this, and they became afraid. They did not fear humans because humans were weak. They feared humans because humans were too strong, too fast, too clever. In just 5 decades, this young species from a small blue planet had started to change the balance of power that had existed for 10,000 years. So the Conquered did what powerful groups always do when they feel threatened. They made rules. The leaders of 17 species gathered on their capital world of Nexus Prime. They talked for many months about what they called the human problem. In the end, they created something called the Terran Limitation Protocols. These protocols were chains disguised as laws. No human ship could be built larger than a certain size. No human fleet could have more than 12 vessels. No human could hold political power outside their own solar system. Human artificial intelligence had to be watched by alien supervisors at all times. And most importantly, human military technology could never advance beyond what existed in the year 2301. The aliens announced these rules with kind words. They said they were protecting humanity from growing too fast. They said young species needed guidance. They said it was for everyone's good. But everyone knew the truth. The cage had been built, and humanity was locked inside. Admiral remembered the day the protocols were announced. She had been a young officer then, full of hope for humanity's future among the stars. She had watched that hope die slowly over the following decades. Now her hair was silver, and her face carried the lines of 60 years of military service. She stood before the United Earth Council in a great chamber deep beneath the surface of the moon, and she prepared to say words that could change everything. "They call it integration," said, her voice quiet but strong. "They call it galactic citizenship, but we all know what it really is." The council members shifted in their seats. Speaking against the protocols was not technically illegal, but everyone knew the Conquered had spies everywhere. Continued without hesitation. "The Empire has been expanding into the Outer Rim. They have taken 3 star systems in the last 10 years. The Conquered does nothing to stop them. The Collective conducts illegal experiments on primitive species who have not yet developed space travel. The Conquered looks away." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But when humanity tried to build a single defense station beyond our allowed territory, what happened? Sanctions, trade embargoes, threats of military action." Her eyes swept across the room. "We are not citizens of the galaxy. We are prisoners." An elderly councilman raised his hand. "Admiral, we understand your frustration. Many of us share it. But what would you have us do? Fight the entire galaxy?" Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I am not here to ask permission, councilman. I am here to tell you what has already begun." She touched a control on her wrist, and a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. The council members gasped at what they saw. It was a ship unlike anything humanity had ever built. It was massive, larger than any vessel the protocols allowed. Its hull was covered in sharp angles and strange textures that seemed to shift when you looked at them. Weapons bristled from every surface. "This is the United Earth ship Prometheus," announced. It has been under construction for 15 years in the asteroid fields of the 442 system, hidden from every alien sensor, built by engineers who gave up their normal lives to work in secret, crewed by volunteers who know they may never see their families again. The chamber erupted in noise. Some council members shouted in anger, others called out questions. A few sat in stunned silence. "This is madness," one councilwoman yelled. "If the Conquered discovers this ship, they will destroy us all." "The Conquered has been slowly destroying us for 300 years," replied calmly. "They have simply been patient about it." She gestured to the hologram, zooming in on different parts of the vessel. "The Prometheus violates every single protocol they have chained us with. Its hull is made from materials they told us we could not research. Its engines burn fuel created through processes they banned us from studying. Its weapons use principles they said we were not ready to understand." "How?" another councilman demanded. "How did you build such a thing without anyone knowing?" "Because humans are very good at doing things we are told we cannot do," answered. "And because there are many people on many worlds who are tired of living in a cage." She deactivated the hologram and faced the council directly. "In 72 hours, the Prometheus launches. Its mission is to reach Nexus Prime, the heart of the Conquered itself. We will broadcast the truth about how humanity has been treated. We will show the galaxy that we will no longer accept their limits." "And then what?" the elderly councilman asked quietly. "What happens when 17 species turn their fleets against us?" Met his eyes without flinching. "Then we find out if 300 years of fear was justified." She turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back at the council one final time. "You can try to stop us if you wish. You can send warnings to the Conquered. You can wash your hands of what is coming." Her voice grew hard as steel. "Or you can remember what it felt like to hope. You can remember what it meant to be human before they taught us to be afraid." The door closed behind her, and Admiral walked toward the future she had spent 15 years building. Behind her, the council sat in silence, each member wrestling with the weight of what they had learned. In 72 hours, everything would change. In 72 hours, humanity would finally fight back. The space between stars is cold and dark and endless. No light reaches these places. No warmth. Nothing lives here except the occasional ship passing through on its way to somewhere else. It was the perfect place to hide a secret. Commander James floated through the corridors of the Prometheus, running his fingers along the walls. The metal hummed beneath his touch, vibrating with power that should not exist. Every surface, every system, every bolt and wire in this ship represented something forbidden, something dangerous, something human. He had been a naval officer for 20 years before Admiral approached him with her impossible offer. A chance to captain a ship that broke every rule the galaxy had placed on his species. A chance to strike back against centuries of quiet oppression. A chance that would probably get him killed. He had said yes without hesitation. "You look like a man walking through a graveyard," said a voice behind him. James turned to find Doctor floating toward him. She was the ship's chief scientist, a small woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. She had designed many of the systems that made the Prometheus possible. "Maybe I am," James replied. "This ship is either humanity's salvation or its tombstone. I have not decided which yet." Smiled, but there was worry behind it. "Then let us make sure it is the first one." They moved together through the ship, passing crew members who nodded respectfully as they went. The Prometheus carried 3,000 souls, engineers who had spent years building the vessel in secret, soldiers trained to fight enemies with centuries more experience, scientists who had unlocked knowledge the Conquered had tried to keep hidden, diplomats prepared to negotiate if fighting failed, and ordinary people who simply believed humanity deserved better than a cage. Every single one of them was a volunteer. Every single one knew the mission might be their last. They reached the main observation deck, a wide room with a transparent wall that looked out into the void. Stars glittered in the distance, each one a sun with planets of its own, many of them controlled by species that saw humanity as a threat to be managed rather than equals to be respected. "The crew is ready," said quietly. "Nervous but ready. They know what we are attempting." James nodded slowly. "Do you remember the story of the—" His expression darkened. "The species that destroyed itself 2,000 years ago. Every child in the Conquered learns that story." "Every child in the Conquered learns a lie," James corrected her. "Admiral's intelligence network discovered the truth. They did not destroy themselves. They were destroyed. The founding species of the Conquered did it because they were advancing too quickly. They were too smart, too ambitious, too much like us." Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "And they are doing the same thing to humanity, just slower, more carefully." "They learned from their mistake," James agreed. "Outright destruction creates martyrs and questions. It is much better to simply limit a species, control their development, keep them dependent and weak until they forget they ever had the potential to be anything else." "Then we have to remind them," said fiercely. "Not just the Conquered, our own people too. 300 years of limitations have made too many humans accept the cage as normal." A chime sounded through the ship, and a voice announced that all crew should report to their stations. The time had come. James and made their way to the bridge, a circular room at the heart of the Prometheus. Screens and displays covered every surface, showing the status of systems that no alien had ever seen. Officers sat at their posts, their faces determined despite the fear that lurked behind their eyes. James settled into the command chair, feeling its weight and responsibility settle onto his shoulders. "Jump coordinates are locked," the navigation officer announced. "We are ready on your command." James activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice would reach every corridor, every room, every heart aboard the vessel. "All hands, this is the commander. In a few moments, we are going to do something that 17 species have spent 300 years trying to prevent. They told us we could not do it. They told us we should not try. They told us we were not allowed." He paused, looking around at the faces of his bridge crew. Young and old, men and women, people from every nation on Earth and every colony humanity had been permitted to establish. All of them had chosen to be here. 300 years ago, humanity reached for the stars and found that someone had already claimed them. They welcomed us at first, but then they became afraid of what we might become. So they built walls around us, laws to limit our ships, rules to control our technology, restrictions on where we could go and what we could do. His voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. "They told us it was for our own good. They told us we were too young, too inexperienced, too dangerous to ourselves and others. But we know the truth. They were not protecting us. They were protecting themselves from us." James leaned forward in his chair. "Today, we prove their fears were justified. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity can do when we refuse to accept limits. Today, we take back our future." He looked at the navigation officer and gave a single sharp nod. "Initiate jump." The engines of the Prometheus roared to life with power that violated 17 laws and 3 treaties. Space itself bent around the vessel as it prepared to leap across light years in an instant. The stars on the stretched into long ribbons of light. Colors that had no name swirled around the ship. Reality twisted and turned and reformed. And then the Prometheus was somewhere else, far from the hidden asteroid field, far from Earth and everything humanity had known. They had taken their first step into a galaxy that did not want them. Around the bridge, officers called out readings and confirmations. Systems were stable. The crew was safe. The jump had worked perfectly. James allowed himself a small smile. The conquered scientists had said humans could not develop this type of engine for another 500 years. They had been very wrong. Navigation, set course for the system, James ordered. It is a quiet region 3 jumps from Nexus Prime. We will gather information and prepare for the final approach. The crew worked with smooth efficiency, each person knowing their role. The Prometheus turned toward its destination, a single human vessel against the might of 17 species. The mission had begun. There was no turning back now. In the cold darkness between the stars, humanity had finally started to fight for its freedom. Whatever came next, whatever battles awaited them, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The Prometheus emerged from in the system, and immediately every alarm on the bridge began to scream. Commander James gripped the arms of his chair as his tactical officer shouted out contacts. 17 vessels, enforcement-class cruisers. They are directly ahead of us, sir. James could see them. 17 alien warships arranged in a perfect arc, their weapons already glowing with power. They had been waiting. Somehow, impossibly, they had known exactly where the Prometheus would appear. How, James demanded, how did they know? Unknown, Commander, the tactical officer replied, her voice tight with controlled fear. But they are powering weapons. We have approximately 90 seconds before they are in firing range. James's mind raced through possibilities. A spy on the Council, a leak in their own crew, a sensor technology humanity did not know about. The answer did not matter right now. What mattered was survival. Open a communication channel, he ordered. Let us see what they want. The flickered and a face appeared. It was one of the insect-like species that served as enforcers for the conquered. Its compound eyes glittered with cold satisfaction, and its mandibles clicked together as it spoke. Human vessel, the buzzed in a voice that sounded like stones grinding together. You will power down your engines immediately. You will surrender your crew for protocol violations. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction. You have 30 seconds to comply. James muted the communication and turned to his officers. Options. We cannot outrun them, the navigation officer said immediately. Their ships are faster than ours in normal space. We cannot fight 17 cruisers, the tactical officer added. Even with our advanced weapons, the numbers are simply too great. Silence hung over the bridge. James could feel the weight of 3,000 lives pressing down on him. Every person on this ship had trusted him to lead them. Now they were trapped, outnumbered, facing enemies who would show no mercy. Stepped forward from her station. Her eyes were bright with something that was not fear. It was excitement. Commander, we did not build this ship to run away. We did not build it to hide. We built it to break rules. She met his gaze steadily. All of them. James understood immediately. You are talking about the Cascade system. Yes. It has never been tested in actual combat. Then let us test it now. James looked at the commander on the muted screen, still waiting for a response. He looked at the 17 ships arranged against them. He thought about the 3,000 people counting on him, and the billions more back on Earth who did not even know this battle was happening. Then he unmuted the channel. Enforcement Fleet, this is Commander James of the United Earth ship Prometheus. I have a counteroffer for you. The clicked its mandibles impatiently. You are in no position to offer anything, human. You have violated 17 protocols and entered restricted space with an illegal vessel. Surrender now or... Watch, James interrupted calmly. He turned to his weapons officer, a young woman named Sarah who had spent 3 years helping to design the systems she now controlled. Fire the Cascade. Sarah's hands moved across her console with practiced precision. Deep within the Prometheus, systems that existed nowhere else in the galaxy hummed to life. Power flowed through conduits made from materials the conquered had forbidden. Calculations ran through computers that should not have been possible. The Prometheus did not launch missiles. It did not fire energy beams. Instead, it released something else entirely. A pulse of light erupted from the ship, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. It moved faster than any weapon, faster than any sensor could track. The light was not hot. It was not explosive. It was something far more dangerous. The pulse washed over the 17 alien cruisers like a wave crashing against rocks. And every single ship went dark. On the enforcement vessels, screens flickered and died. Engines sputtered and fell silent. Weapons that had been charging suddenly lost all power. Life support systems stuttered, switching to emergency backups. Navigation computers crashed, losing all data. Communication systems filled with static and then nothing at all. In seconds, 17 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy had been reduced to floating metal coffins. Emergency lights flickered on aboard the commander's vessel, bathing the bridge in dim red illumination. The aliens' compound eyes were wide with something they had not felt in a very long time: fear. What have you done?" The screamed, its voice distorted by failing speakers. James leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a small smile. "We just demonstrated something that your Conquered never wanted to admit. You did not limit human technology because we were dangerous to you. You limited it because you were afraid of how fast we learn." On the screen, the commander struggled to maintain control of a ship that no longer responded to any command. Other crew members could be seen in the background, scrambling desperately to restore systems that refused to function. "Your ships will reboot in approximately 6 hours," James continued, his voice calm and measured. "All your systems will return to normal. Your crew will be unharmed. Consider this a demonstration of what we are capable of when we are merely trying to escape." He stood, straightening his uniform. "I suggest you use those 6 hours to contact your superiors. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that the rules they made to contain humanity are no longer working. And tell them that if they send ships after us again, we will not be so gentle." They tried to respond, but its communication system finally died completely. The screen went dark. Around the bridge, the crew of the Prometheus sat in stunned silence. They had just done the impossible. They had faced an enemy fleet and won without firing a single conventional weapon. "Navigation," James said quietly. "Set course for our next jump point. We continue to Nexus Prime." "Yes, Commander," the navigation officer replied, his voice slightly unsteady with released tension. As the Prometheus turned away from the drifting alien ships, moved to stand beside James's chair. "That was the first time the Cascade has been used in combat," she said softly. "It worked even better than we hoped." "Let us hope it continues to work," James replied. "We have a long way to go, and they will be more prepared next time." Nodded, but there was something new in her expression. Hope, real hope for the first time in years. "They spent 300 years convincing us that we could not match their technology," she said. "Today we proved them wrong. Whatever happens next, we have already changed everything." James watched the stars wheel past as the ship prepared for its next jump. Somewhere behind them, 17 alien commanders were sitting in the dark, wondering how everything they believed about humanity had just been shattered. It was only the beginning. Nexus Prime hung in space like a jewel against black velvet. The capital world of the Conquered was beautiful beyond words, covered in floating cities that gravity and towers of crystal that caught the light of 3 suns. Billions of beings from 17 different species lived there, working and trading, and governing the galaxy from this single magnificent world. Commander James looked at it through and felt his heart beating faster. They had made it. After 2 more jumps and 1 narrow escape from a patrol fleet, the Prometheus had reached its destination. Now came the hard part. "We are being hailed by approximately everyone," the communications officer announced, his voice carrying a hint of dark humor. Concord Security Command, Enforcement Fleet Headquarters, representatives from 12 different species councils, and what I believe is the Galactic Media Network. James considered his options. They had come here to deliver a message. It was time to start talking. "Put the media through," he ordered. "It is time the galaxy heard what we have to say." The flickered, and a familiar face appeared. Was a human journalist who had spent her entire career on Nexus Prime, reporting on alien affairs for audiences back on Earth. Her expression now was a complicated mixture of shock, fear, and something that might have been hope. "Commander," she said carefully, clearly aware that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching this transmission. "The Conquered is calling you a terrorist. They say you have committed an act of war against the galactic community. What do you have to say in response?" James had prepared for this moment for 15 years. He kept his voice calm and clear. "Ms. the Conquered has been committing acts of war against humanity for 3 centuries. They simply called it policy instead of aggression." He turned slightly. "Doctor, please begin the transmission." Moved to her console and activated a data stream that would broadcast across every frequency, to every receiver, on every world within range. Files that had been gathered through years of careful espionage began flowing out into the galaxy. "Ms., we are sending you documentation right now. Evidence that the Conquered has systematically sabotaged human development. Proof that they have manipulated our economy, our science, our political systems. Records of how they have violated their own laws repeatedly while punishing us for imaginary crimes." His eyes widened as data began appearing on screens around her. "This is, Commander, some of these documents are marked with the highest security classifications in the Conquered." "Yes, they are, and they show that we are not the first species the Conquered has done this to." James paused, letting the weight of his next words build. "We have proof of what they did to the—" Even through the screen, James could see go pale. They were the species that destroyed themselves through internal warfare. Every child in the galaxy learns that story. "Every child in the galaxy learns a lie," said, stepping forward to stand beside James. "They did not destroy themselves. They were exterminated. 1800 years ago, the founding species of the Conquered decided that they were advancing too quickly. They were solving problems too fast, developing technology too rapidly, and beginning to challenge the established order." She activated another display, showing ancient records in languages that had not been spoken for. "So the founders killed them. They destroyed hunted down their colony ships, and erased almost all evidence that they had ever existed. Then they created a story about a species that had foolishly destroyed itself, a cautionary tale to justify controlling any other species that rose too fast. A species like humanity," James added quietly. The transmission was going out across the galaxy now. On Nexus Prime, screens in public squares and private homes were displaying the secret files. The truth that had been buried for 18 centuries was finally seeing the light. "They learned from James continued. "Outright genocide creates questions and martyrs. It is much more effective to simply limit a species, control their development, keep them weak and dependent until they forget they ever had the potential to be anything else." Was scrolling through the files rapidly, her journalist instincts overcoming her shock. "Commander, these documents also show the expansion into the Outer Rim. The Conquered approved it secretly while publicly condemning it, and the experiments on primitive species. There are authorization codes from the Conquered Council itself. The rules they enforced so strictly against humanity were never applied to themselves or their allies," James confirmed. "We were not being integrated into galactic civilization. We were being slowly strangled while they told us it was a hug." A warning alarm interrupted the conversation. The tactical officer's voice was sharp with urgency. Commander, Enforcement Fleet is mobilizing. I am counting 200 vessels breaking orbit from Nexus Prime's defense stations. They are on intercept course. Arrival in 20 minutes. 200 ships. Even the Cascade system could not disable that many at once. The Prometheus was the most advanced vessel humanity had ever built, but it could not fight an entire armada alone. James looked at the tactical display, watching the wall of enemy vessels approaching. He thought about the 3,000 crew members who had followed him to this moment. He thought about humanity, trapped in a cage for 300 years, finally daring to reach for freedom. "All hands to battle stations," he said, his voice steady despite the odds. "We came here to tell the truth. We told it. Now we show them that we are willing to die for it." The bridge crew moved to their positions with grim determination. Weapon systems powered up. Shields came online. The Prometheus turned to face the approaching fleet like a single sword raised against an army. Touched James's arm gently. "It has been an honor, Commander." "The honor was mine, Doctor," James smiled slightly. "Whatever happens now, we change something today. They cannot hide the truth anymore. Billions of beings across the galaxy are seeing those files right now. Even if they destroy us, the questions will remain." The enemy fleet grew larger on the 200 warships armed with weapons that could crack planets. They had overwhelming numbers, overwhelming firepower, and absolutely no mercy for the humans who had dared to challenge them. James took a deep breath. "This is Commander to all crew. You know the odds. You know what we face. But remember why we came here. Remember what we are fighting for. 300 years of chains end today. Whatever happens in the next hour, we face it together." He straightened in his chair and faced the approaching storm. "Helm, take us forward. Let us meet them." The Prometheus accelerated toward 200 enemy vessels, and history held its breath. The battle above Nexus Prime would be remembered for 10,000 years. 200 enforcement vessels against one human ship. The odds were not just bad. They were laughable. Every military expert in the galaxy would have called it suicide. A single vessel, no matter how advanced, could not possibly stand against such overwhelming force. But the Prometheus had not been built by military experts. It had been built by humans who had spent 3 centuries being underestimated, and they had poured every ounce of frustration and ingenuity and defiance into its design. Commander James watched the enemy fleet close in and gave his orders calmly. "All weapons free. Helm, begin evasion pattern Delta. Let us show them what we can do." The Prometheus moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Its hull was covered in adaptive materials that shifted and changed, confusing enemy targeting systems. Weapons fired at where the ship was, only to find it had already moved somewhere else. Energy beams that should have torn through metal instead scattered harmlessly against surfaces that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. And the human weapons fired back. Beams of focused energy lanced out from the Prometheus, each one precisely calculated to strike enemy vessels at their weakest points. Alien cruisers that had never faced human technology at full power suddenly found their shields overloaded and their hulls breached. Ships that had expected an easy victory exploded into clouds of debris. The bridge of the Prometheus shook as enemy fire found its mark. Damage reports flooded in from across the ship, but the crew kept fighting, kept moving, kept proving that humanity would not go quietly. "Direct hit on decks 7 through 12, the damage control officer reported. "We have lost the secondary reactor, casualties in engineering." "Cascade system is overheating," warned from her station. "One more pulse and we burn it out completely." James watched another wave of enemy ships approach. They had destroyed or disabled 60 vessels. 140 remained, and more were jumping into the system every minute. The Conquered was throwing everything it had at this single defiant ship. "This is it," James thought. "We made our statement. We proved what we could do. Now we die as free humans rather than live as prisoners." "Commander," the sensor officer's voice cracked with shock. "New contacts emerging from." James looked at the display, expecting to see more enemy reinforcements. What he saw made his heart stop. Ships were appearing from nothing. Human ships, not just a few, dozens, then hundreds. They emerged in waves, vessel after vessel dropping out of around the battlefield. Ships of every size and configuration, flying flags from Earth, Mars, Titan, and a dozen other human colonies. Mining vessels that had been secretly armed. Transport ships converted into carriers. Hidden warships that had been built in the shadows of 100 asteroids. A familiar voice crackled over the communication system. "Commander, did you really think we would let you have all the fun?" Admiral's face appeared on screen, her silver hair wild and her eyes blazing with fierce joy. Behind her, the impossible fleet spread across the void like stars coming to life. Admiral James breathed. "How?" "The protocols said no human fleet could have more than 12 vessels," replied with a grim smile. "They never said we could not have multiple fleets." The tide of battle shifted in an instant. Enforcement vessels that had been closing in for the kill suddenly found themselves surrounded. Human ships that should not have existed attacked from every direction, using weapons and tactics that the conquered had never anticipated. The alien fleet began to break apart. Some ships tried to flee, others fought desperately. None of them had expected this. And then something even more unexpected happened. A cluster of alien vessels powered down their weapons and broke formation. They were not retreating, they were standing down. Then another group did the same, and another. "Commander," the communications officer said slowly, "we are receiving transmissions from multiple species delegations. They are withdrawing from the battle." James stared at the display in confusion. Why? The answer came from a new voice cutting through the chaos. A captain appeared on screen, her avian features tight with emotion. They were supposed to be loyal supporters of the conquered. They had been expanding their territory with secret conquered approval for decades. "We have seen the files you broadcast," she said, her voice trembling. We were told they destroyed themselves through foolish wars. We were lied to for 1800 years." Her eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. How many others were there? How many species did the founders erase because they feared competition? How do we know our own ancestors were not saved only because they were weak enough to be useful? Another voice joined in, a commander of all beings. "If they did it to they could do it to any of us. We have been enforcing rules that were created by murderers." Across the battlefield, the enforcement fleet fractured. Ships from species that had served the conquered loyally for suddenly questioned everything they had been taught. Some continued fighting. Others, a few, even turned their weapons on vessels that tried to attack the humans. Old grievances, long buried under the weight of conquered authority, suddenly burst into flame. Species that had been rivals for thousands of years remembered why they had hated each other before the founders forced them into alliance. In the heart of the chaos, the Prometheus held steady. Around it, the human fleet formed a protective sphere, shields overlapping, weapons ready but held. James watched the alien armada tear itself apart and felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. 6 months later, the Treaty of New Concordance was signed on a space station built in neutral territory. Representatives from all 17 species gathered alongside human diplomats. The Terran limitation protocols were officially abolished. A new framework for galactic civilization was established, one built on transparency and genuine equality rather than fear and control. Admiral stood beside Commander and Doctor, watching alien leaders who had once seen humanity as a threat now treating them as partners. "It will not be easy," said quietly. "Old habits die hard. Some of them will try to put us back in our place." "Let them try," James replied. We showed them what we are capable of when we are cornered. Now we get to show them what we can do as friends. Smiled, watching a young human diplomat share a laugh with a delegate. Across the station, former enemies were beginning conversations that would have been impossible a year ago. 300 years they told us to know our place, said. They made rules to stop us, so we built a warship to break them. She turned to face the stars visible through the station's windows. Countless points of light, each one a possibility. But the ship was never really the point, she continued. The point was proving that nothing they do can stop what we are. James looked at her curiously. And what is that? Admiral, architect of humanity's liberation, answered with one simple word. Unstoppable. Outside the windows, human and alien ships flew side by side for the first time in 3 centuries. The galaxy had changed forever, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the spirit of the finally rested, knowing that their story would never be forgotten again. Humanity had broken its chains. Now it was time to help build something better. Together,